There is no bar to knowledge greater than contempt prior to examination. Yeshua's teaching was that narrow path to get closer to God was by searching the Torah and the prophets to determine what the original Torah said, living by what you had personally assumed as your Torah, and forgiving other people as you would like to be forgiven by God. He taught that a person could not get closer to God through trying to follow the constantly changing oral traditions of men, or that sin could be forgiven through the sacrifice of animals. Because his teachings contradicted the teachings of the major sects of the time, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the religious authorities of his day would do and continue to do anything and everything to prevent the common Jew from hearing his message. Yeshua threatened to put the Sadducees' meat market out of business and to disrupt the Pharisees' power to be the gatekeeper between man and God. Yeshua did not teach about a personal relationship with God in the way the Christians teach it. Instead, he taught that we have a personal responsibility to determine what was in the original Torah by examining the prophets and the writings to determine where the scribes have changed the instructions God originally gave through Moshe. The most significant difference between the religion of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam for that matter, and what Yeshua taught is that all three of the Abrahamic faiths teach that God is a righteous judge, and therefore he cannot deviate from the prescribed punishment unless certain conditions are met, or he is not righteous. God wrote the law, and he is judge over who has violated the law, and is ultimately the executioner. The God the Abrahamic faiths declare in our world would be called a despot. Yeshua taught that God is not a righteous judge, but a loving Father. He has laid down the house rules in preparation of you coming into his home. You have an opportunity while you're on the earth to learn what those rules are and practice them so that God will not find you offensive when you come into his presence. The good news that Yeshua preached was that God really does not care what you did in the past, no matter how terrible it was, assuming you have learned your lesson and would not do it again in the future. This was the best news that prostitutes and tax collectors could ever hear, and the worst news possible for people who profited by accepting payment on God's behalf from people who felt guilty for their past actions. Yeshua taught, after we know God's house rules and are doing our best to follow them, there is one more thing that we must do if our soul will be able to continue to serve God after our body ceases to be able to serve us. We must forgive each and every person that God has sent to teach us a hard lesson or test our love for him. I personally cannot think of a single Christian I have ever met that believes in this type of forgiveness. My experience is that most Christians have a bigger problem. They harbor a much deeper resentment toward God than they do against any human being. Most Christians I know are unable to forgive God for not making this life as perfect as the heaven they dream of. Shalom.